Hi, my name is Sidra, and I'm the coordinator of the Immigrant and Refugee Communities Neighbors, Friends, and Families campaign. In this video, we're going to talk about the warning signs of domestic violence and the signs of high risk. Everyone has a role to play in learning what domestic violence is, what the signs of domestic violence are, and how to help if someone you know is living with domestic violence. So how will we know that someone is living with abuse? The Neighbors, Friends, and Families campaign has put together a list of warning signs. Now, these are behaviors and attitudes you may see in a woman who is living with violence or in a man who is being abusive. This list of warning signs are just guidelines. Don't think that seeing one warning sign means that domestic violence is definitely happening. And also don't think that you need to see all of the warning signs present in order to be concerned. These are just guidelines to help you pause, reflect, check in with your gut, and then think about whether you want to take the next step, which is to offer support and start a conversation. And we'll be covering how to offer support in an upcoming video. So what are the warning signs? The first set of warning signs I'm going to tell you about are warning signs you may see in the behavior of a man who is being abusive. So when you see him interacting with his partner out in the community, or when you're visiting him in their home, you may notice these behaviors, and these may indicate that something is going on. So what does it look like? You may notice that he puts her down. He may also be the one that does all of the talking. It may seem like he acts as if he owns her, like she's part of his property. He may act like he's superior to absolutely everyone in his home. On the other hand, he may say that he's the victim and act like he's depressed. You may also notice that he tries to keep her away from you, and that it's difficult to speak to her on her own, and he's always around. And finally, he may lie and exaggerate his good qualities to make himself look good and like he's a great person. Next, I'm going to talk about warning signs you may see in the behavior of a woman who is living with domestic violence. So these are attitudes or changes in her behavior that may tip you off that something is going on and you might want to offer support. You may notice that she apologizes for her partner's behavior. Or, on the other hand, she may get angry and defensive about his behavior. She may seem sad, lonely, and withdrawn. You may notice that she seems nervous about talking when her partner is around. And it might be hard to get in touch with her. You may notice that she's starting to cancel plans at the last minute and even avoid you when she sees you in the street. She may also call in sick for work a lot more. And she may start using more drugs and alcohol to cope with what's going on. And finally, she may have bruises or injuries that she's trying to cover up. Now we're going to talk about warning signs of high risk. And by high risk, we mean risk that the abuser will murder the woman that he is abusing. So I do want to issue a trigger warning. What we'll be talking about is disturbing and distressing. So please pause the video and take breaks if you feel triggered, and practice excellent self-care. These risk factors were identified by very detailed research in Ontario conducted by the Domestic Violence Death Review Committee. And as the name suggests, the purpose of this committee is to review domestic violence deaths that happen in Ontario and analyze whether there are risk factors and patterns that are present within these homicides. The risk factors I'm going to be telling you about are straight out of the Domestic Violence Death Review Committee report. And this report was released in November 2016 and is the latest report available. They actually have 40 risk factors in total, which are present in the full report. But I'm going to talk about the top 10 risk factors that they've identified. The first risk factor is a history of domestic violence. And this can be any form of violence or abuse and did not have to result in charges or convictions. It's just that there was a history of domestic violence. The second risk factor we're going to talk about is actual or pending separation. Many people often ask women living with domestic abuse, why don't you leave? And research, this data shows that the time of leaving a relationship or planning to leave a relationship is actually the most dangerous time for women living with abuse. That is why it is very important for women living with violence who are planning to leave or who would like to leave to have a safety plan. We're going to talk more about safety planning in an upcoming video when we talk about how to support women who are living with abuse. The third risk factor is obsessive behavior displayed by the perpetrator. Obsessive behavior is anything that shows that the perpetrator had an intense preoccupation with the victim. For example, stalking behaviors. This can look like following the victim, making repeated phone calls, or spying on her. The next high risk factor is that the perpetrator was depressed. And this does not have to be a formal diagnosis. It can be simply that people around him noticed that he seemed depressed. The next risk factor is prior attempts or threats by the perpetrator to commit suicide. And what this means is that within the last 6 months, the perpetrator has said something that would indicate that he wants to kill himself. And it doesn't matter if these threats were taken seriously or not. The point is that they happened. And suicide threats can be made in direct or indirect ways. For example, the perpetrator may have said to the victim that if you ever leave me, I'll kill myself. On the other hand, he may make more passive comments like, the world would be better off without me. The next risk factor is escalation of violence. And what this means is that the violence that the perpetrator was inflicting on the victim was increasing either in frequency or in severity. So this might have been obvious in, for example, more frequent trips to the hospital. The next risk factor is that the perpetrator has made a threat to kill the victim. Now, this threat can be made over the phone, in a letter, or in person. He may have directly threatened her by saying, if you ever leave me, I'm going to kill you. On the other hand, he may have threatened her indirectly by saying things like, if I can't be with you, no one can. Another risk factor is that the perpetrator had excessive drug or alcohol use and appeared to be dependent upon or addicted to the substance. He may have been told by people around him that he should quit, and people may have seen him constantly intoxicated. Excessive drug and alcohol use can be seen by an increase in the amount that the perpetrator is using, and also that his behavior drastically changes when he is intoxicated. The next risk factor is that the victim had an intuitive sense of fear. What this means is that the victim has made statements like, I fear for my life. I think he's going to kill me. She expressed that she had an intuitive sense that violence was going to escalate. That is why it is very important for us to believe women when they talk about the risk that they are facing. Women know intuitively when they are in danger, and it is very important for us to listen to them, believe them, and offer support and never minimize what they are going through. The final risk factor is that the perpetrator is unemployed. And this means he does not have full-time or part-time work and is not self-employed. Being unemployed can also mean he has very frequent job changes or has long stretches where he isn't working. He may be on ODSP, he may be on social assistance, he may be on workers' compensation or employment insurance. Now that we've gone through these risk factors, I want to talk to you about how they work together in combination. The Domestic Violence Death Review Committee found that 7 out of 10 of these risk factors were present in 72% of all of the cases they reviewed. What that means is around 3/4 of all of the domestic violence deaths that they reviewed, they had 7 out of 10 of these risk factors. What that tells us is that the more risk factors that are present in a specific domestic violence situation, the more concerned we should be that it may escalate to homicide. And indeed, we should take each of these risk factors very seriously and offer women the support that they need to access safety. The more that we know, the better position we'll be in to support women living with abuse and to help them access the safety, freedom, and joy that they deserve. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope that it was helpful to you and that we can keep working together to end violence against women.